All right, here we have a very common question in trigonometry. We're being asked to evaluate the cosine of the sine inverse of x. The first and foremost important thing we understand is that cosine takes inputs of angles. So this sine inverse of x is describing an angle, and specifically, let's call it theta. Theta equals the sine inverse of x. Sometimes this is hard to understand, but what we can do instead is rewrite this with sine. So this written in terms of sine would be that the sine of theta, or the sine of the angle being described here, equals x. So what we're doing is this angle theta has a sine value of x. We're being asked what the cosine of that is. We could use Pythagorean identities, but a very common way is to create a triangle. So I'm going to create a triangle with a theta, with an angle that has a sine of x, and then what I'm going to do is find the cosine of that angle. So we've got a right triangle here. I'll just call this angle theta. Doesn't matter which of the non-90 degree angles I do. If I want the sine of this to be x, again, it's just the ratio of the opposite over the hypotenuse. I can choose any values as long as whatever I choose for this divided by the hypotenuse is equal to x. The easiest way to do that is I'm just going to call this x, and I'm going to call this 1. So the sine of this angle is x, because it's x over 1. What I need to do is find the cosine. The cosine is the adjacent side over the hypotenuse. So what I need to do now is find out what this side would have to be. I can simply use the Pythagorean theorem for this, where they have x squared. I need to give this some kind of value. Let's call this a right here. So what I know is a squared plus x squared equals 1, or 1 squared for the hypotenuse. I'm going to solve this for a. So a squared equals 1 minus x squared. Take the square root to get a equals plus or minus the square root of 1 minus x squared, but I'm only going to consider positive values because I'm looking at this right triangle right here. So it's the square root of 1 minus x squared. So this a right here is the square root of 1 minus x squared, so I'll replace that real fast. So what I've done now is I've solved this triangle for all of these sides. Given the information that the sine of this angle right here is x, the cosine then, so now I'm trying to find the cosine of this angle, is the answer to this. And the cosine is the adjacent side divided by the hypotenuse, which actually ends up just being the square root of 1 minus x squared.